Overdoses involved fentanyl and other synthetic opioids topped 71,000, accounting for two-thirds of all fatal overdoses in 2021.
Fentanyl is killing America. Just a minuscule amount of the drug can be lethal. In 2022, the death toll from fentanyl overdose surpassed a staggering 100,000 people in the United States.
All right, we've been reporting this week on America's worsening fentanyl crisis, and today the CDC shared a truly staggering statistic on drug overdoses.
Record numbers of cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamine users are dying from overdoses without realizing they've ingested fentanyl. In cities across the country, people walk the streets like zombies. Those addicted to opioids seek out illegally produced fentanyl in pills to alleviate their pain. Others often take it, mistaking it for legitimate pain medications like oxycodone. U.S. law enforcement agencies are on high alert due to the massive influx of fentanyl from Mexico in both pill and powder forms flooding the streets. On the other side of the border, the Sinaloa cartel and the Cártel de Jalisco Nueva Generacion, the two biggest illegal fentanyl producers in Mexico, are making a fortune by manufacturing it at low costs and trafficking it northbound to the U.S. with ease. The illicit fentanyl network is operating at full throttle, but how much money are the cartels making? Who runs the fentanyl empire? In this episode of Illicit Investigations, we're taking you deep into Mexico to uncover the kings of fentanyl who are killing America. We'll expose how this deadly substance is produced in improvised labs, transported across the border, and distributed throughout the U.S. Join us as we explore the underground network of the drug that is fueling the deadliest opioid epidemic in America's history, while filling up the pockets of extremely dangerous Mexican narcos. For decades, Mexican farmers in marginalized regions have relied on illicit opium poppy cultivation for survival, primarily for the U.S. heroin market. The opium is obtained from the milky sap of the beautiful poppy flower, which serves as the essential raw material for heroin production. Mexican cartels were eager to obtain this opium and until 2017 would pay farmers up to $1,300 per kilogram. However, in 2018, the prices plummeted. Farmers in the Golden Triangle, a mountainous region spanning the states of Sinaloa, Chihuahua, and Durango, historically known for its extensive opium poppy and marijuana plantations to supply the Sinaloa cartel, could only sell their opium production for approximately $300 per kilogram. The same happened to farmers in the Sierra Madre del Sur mountain range, located in the states of Michoacan, Guerrero, and Chiapas. The reason for the price drop was that Mexican cartels hacked the production of heroin and lowered its costs. They mixed a small amount of heroin with fentanyl, a synthetic opioid analog of fentanyl that can be produced with low-cost precursors from China. This resulted in the production of a mostly synthetic heroin called China White, which is sold in the streets across the U.S. However, the cartels did not stop there. Despite being illegal entities, they operate like large companies, constantly seeking cost efficiency in their production and logistics. They hire top-notch chemists and physicians from around the world and take them to Mexico to develop new drug formulas and train cartel cooks. In approximately 2018, the Sinaloa cartel began the large-scale production of fentanyl in Mexico using cheap precursors easily obtained from China. The Sinaloa cartel understood the Americans' addiction to prescribed painkillers, so they found a revolutionary product, blue pills of fentanyl, sometimes even marked as oxycodone.
People talk about super labs and what have you that exist in Mexico. These are not super labs. These are labs that consist of a metal puff, and they mix the chemicals with a shovel or with a wooden paddle. And when it comes out as powder, they have pill presses and they make counterfeit pills like oxycodone and what have you.
For the cartel, the business is enormous. The cost to produce 1 kilogram of fentanyl in an improvised lab in Sinaloa is around $5,000, which can produce more than 1 million painkiller pills. The street value of these pills in the U.S. is between $5 and $20 each, resulting in huge revenue for the cartels. They also produce fentanyl in powder form and sell it wholesale to their clients in U.S. cities for around $80,000 per kilo. Local drug dealers use it to cut cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamines. But controlling the correct dose in a makeshift lab is almost impossible, leading to deadly mistakes. Fentanyl is 100 times more potent than morphine, and just 2 milligrams of it, which is the same amount that could fit on the tip of a pencil, is considered a potentially lethal dose for one person. As a result, last year over 100,000 Americans died from fentanyl overdoses, many of whom were unaware that they were consuming fentanyl because they were buying coke, meth, or heroin from their local drug dealers. But where did fentanyl come from? As other synthetic opioids, fentanyl was created by the pharmaceutical industry to be used mainly for pain management. Its analgesic potency is huge. The maximum dose approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration for patients with severe pain is 1,600 micrograms. More than that amount can cause respiratory depression, coma, and death. Those who become addicted to fentanyl may find it challenging to quit without professional help. Belgian physician Paul Janssen created fentanyl in 1959 for his newly formed Janssen Pharmaceutica. Almost 40 years later, in 1998, the FDA approved the first medicine containing fentanyl in the U.S., a lollipop for managing breakthrough pain in cancer patients. Similar medicines soon followed. Back in Mexico, cartels import from China the chemical precursors needed to produce fentanyl in clandestine labs. China collaborates with U.S. authorities and has signed on to United Nations agreements to restrict the exports of certain chemicals, including NPP and 4-ANPP, the 2 direct precursors used for fentanyl. However, the country's large chemical industry, its numerous coastal cities with high-volume seaports, and its vast network of international airports make it an ideal hub for drug and precursor chemical production and trafficking. Also, the cartels have found a way to mislabel the fentanyl precursors with other names prior to departing China. For example, they'll label a shipment of NPP as printer ink, misleading Chinese, Mexican, and U.S. authorities.
The Mexican cartels, primarily the Jalisco New Generation cartel and the Sinaloa cartel, can easily buy the finished product or the precursor chemicals from China that they bring in aboard maritime ships into the ports of Lázaro Cárdenas in Michoacán, in Manzanillo in the state of Colima, and then also in Veracruz, the state of Veracruz.
The Sinaloa cartel has turned the surrounding rural areas of Culiacán, the capital city of Sinaloa, into its fentanyl production hub. Once the deadly product is completed, it's transported by land in trucks to 3 towns in the state of Sonora, bordering Arizona: Sonoita, Nogales, and Agua Prieta. Also, fishermen boats departing from Mazatlan travel north through the Gulf of California, carrying fentanyl shipments to small towns in Baja California. The shipments are then taken by land to Tijuana and Mexicali, 2 of the biggest hubs for the Sinaloa cartel along the U.S.-Mexico border. The head of the cartel's biggest faction is the elusive 75-year-old Ismael El Mayo Zambada, who has never been in jail despite being a fugitive for decades. El Mayo was Joaquin El Chapo Guzman's partner, and together they built a drug empire that has reached 5 continents. Since El Chapo's arrest in 2016, El Mayo Zambada has taken control of the largest portion of the criminal organization. He has 2 key lieutenants overseeing the drug operations in northern Mexico. One of them is his son-in-law, Juan Carlos Felix Castellum, aka El Chavo Felix, who is married to Teresita Zambada Ortiz, one of El Mayo's youngest daughters. The other top lieutenant is Jesus Alexander Sanchez Felix, aka El Russo or the Russian, a sanguinary hitman who was escalated to the top of the cartel and has led several drug wars with other groups, including one against the sons of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Known as the Chapitos, Ivan Archivaldo and Jesus Alfredo manage the other faction of the Sinaloa cartel. They smuggle fentanyl on a smaller scale to Arizona through border towns in Sonora. Their associates in this region are Los Salazar, a criminal organization commanded by Jose Crispin Salazar Zamorano, aka Tio Pin, and his brother Adan. Meanwhile, in Ciudad Juarez, Chihuahua, a local gang called Los Mexicles smuggles fentanyl to El Paso, Texas for the Sinaloa cartel. The notorious Sinaloa cartel in Mexico faces stiff competition from the Cártel de Jalisco Nueva Generacion, also known as CJNG. This ruthless organization, led by Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, aka El Mencho, is responsible for the bulk of fentanyl production in the states of Michoacan, Guerrero, Jalisco, and the state of Mexico. Tijuana is CJNG's primary hub for smuggling fentanyl into the United States. In TJ, they have two groups of sicarios who manage their drug operations, Los Cabos and Los Ares. The latter is commanded by Javier Adrian Beltran Cabrera, aka El Javi. In the past year, CJNG forged an alliance with La Línea cartel in Ciudad Juarez, a historical enemy of the Sinaloa cartel. And now, La Línea oversees the fentanyl smuggling operations into western Texas for El Mencho. Another crucial fentanyl route for CJNG begins in Michoacan and Jalisco. Truck drivers carrying export goods to Nueva Laredo, Tamaulipas, which borders Laredo, Texas, transport the drug in hidden compartments. In Nuevo Laredo, the fentanyl is taken to stash houses to coordinate its smuggling into Texas by CJNG sicarios. Over the past year, the reach of El Mencho's empire has expanded into Nuevo Laredo, a town historically run by the Zetas, now called the Cartel del Noreste, or CDN. But once the fentanyl is stored in the Mexican side border towns, how is it smuggled into the U.S.? Contrary to cocaine, heroin, or methamphetamine, fentanyl is smaller and easier to transport. Smugglers pack it into hidden compartments of cars and SUVs, making it difficult for U.S. Customs and Border Protection officers to detect. Cartels recruit different profiles of U.S. citizens and permanent residents as drug mules who cross the border on a daily basis, either walking or by car. Individuals who live on the Mexican side and cross the border every day, such as workers, college students, or simply American families who cross to Mexico to run errands and go back to the U.S. the same day. Shockingly, many of these drug mules are members of a U.S. government pre-clearance program called Sentry, which allows them to skip long lines and inspections at the border. In 2021, a staggering 86% of fentanyl arrests at the border were U.S. citizens. Once the fentanyl makes its way into the U.S., it's distributed across major cities through a complex network of cars, trucks, and even the U.S. Postal Service. Fentanyl is a threat in high schools, colleges, and to those addicted to painkillers and other drugs.
Now, I was just in San Francisco, a couple of months ago, and just walking down Market Street, and you start seeing people, like on zombies, and just feeling that your life is threatened because these people just lost it. And they're desperate for this drug that is so cheap now, and it's easy to get. You could get it on the internet, you could get it. People that are selling it on drug points.
Drug traffickers sell fentanyl in the form of fake prescription pills, which are indistinguishable from real medication. They're sold in the streets, online, and anonymous darknet markets, and even social media apps, making it incredibly difficult to track down the source. Cartels have expanded their inventory to sell fentanyl in a variety of bright colors, shapes, and sizes. Rainbow fentanyl was first reported to the DEA in February 2022 and has now been seized in 21 U.S. states.
The victims are young, old, rich, and poor. This crisis is impacting communities across the country.
The problem is more serious than ever, with fentanyl overdoses remaining the leading cause of death for Americans aged 18 to 45 since 2020. Law enforcement agencies and policymakers are taking action. There have been crackdowns on fentanyl trafficking, and drug policies are changing to increase access to overdose-reversing drugs like naloxone. In Mexico, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador says his government is making strong efforts to dismantle the fentanyl production. But it is clear that corruption in Mexico at all levels is a huge obstacle. While tens of thousands of Americans are dying due to overdoses, the kings of fentanyl, Ismael El Mayo Zambada and Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, El Mencho, are filling up their pockets and fueling a war in Mexico with blood money. This is Illicit Investigations. Subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell to go beyond the headlines.